Welcome into the episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. Today's episode is all about the mental game. Love talking about the mental game. I think it's one of the most overlooked parts of the game because we're also focused on mechanics and strength and all these different things that are a ton of fun to talk about and break down. But I haven't seen anything move the needle in a player's development quite like them improving their mental game. So the way this episode is going to work is I'm going to outline how the brain works because I think it's important to understand why the brain works the way it does. And I think it'll create some aha moments for you. And then after that, we're going to get into several different ways that will help you improve your mental game. I want to start out today's episode with a great quote by Roger Hornsby, a Hall of Fame hitter. And he made this quote, which I love. It was, "For the first 60 at-bats of the year, anybody could get me out. For the next 60 at-bats, nobody could get me out. And after that, my money was made." And I love that quote because that is what hitting is in a nutshell. And quite frankly, it's what the game of baseball or the game of softball is in a nutshell as well. Because there's going to be times where you walk up to the plate, you feel invincible. It doesn't matter who's on the mound. And then there's going to be other times where you walk up there and you think there's a hole in your bat. And so I think it's good to hear different quotes like that because what it does is it makes you realize that even the players at the highest level of the game, they still feel the exact same types of emotions that you feel. They still feel that doubt. They feel that anxiety, that stress, all those different things. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I was coaching professional baseball for the few years. Like I actually left professional baseball, and sometimes people will ask, what was your experience like? What advice do you have to maybe to younger players now? And honestly, maybe it's a contrarian take to, compared to what other people would say, but I left professional baseball feeling like playing in the major leagues and making it to the major leagues was a lot more attainable than I had thought prior. And what I mean by that is I realize, having worked with some of the top players in the game and be able to see what goes on behind the scenes, that the best players in the world, they have the exact same fears and doubts and insecurities as a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. The only difference is they don't feel those for as long of a period of time. So they still fail, and they fail quite frequently like anybody else, but they limit how long they fail for. Of course, there's going to be physical tools and skills and things like that are extremely important. But that aside, the mental side, it really does determine who ends up making it and who ends up doesn't. And so I think it's important for players to know that before we get going full blown on today's episode. As I said, we're first going to talk about the brain and how it works. The most important thing to understand is the brain is wired to protect you, not to help you perform. Okay? So its job is to protect you. Its job is not to help you get a game-winning hit in the ninth inning, or to be like somebody who works well under pressure, or is the go-to person when everything's on the line. Its job is to protect you, because I think it's important to know that, because there'll be times when players will be frustrated that they feel anxious and stressed and nervous and all these different situations. And what I always tell them is that means you're normal. That means that your brain is doing its job. And so I think it's important to understand that, because when those feelings do come about, you can just accept the fact that this just means I'm normal. I'm not anything different. I'm not this way, and this is why I can't have success or anything. This just means I'm normal. This is my brain doing its job. And by accepting that, those emotions and feelings run through your body, versus you panicking when those emotions come out. And then what ends up happening is they start getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you're robotic because you're so mentally in your own head. So just understand that's normal to feel those emotions during pressure situations, because your mind isn't built to help you perform in those situations. It's built to protect you, because it wants to avoid embarrassment, humiliation, failure, all those different things. Now it's time to understand, where do our thoughts come from? So we have anywhere from 40,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And the crazy thing is 70 to 80% of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts that we had yesterday. And of those, about 80% of those are negative. So, and you don't even notice a lot of them. They just run in the background, repeating stories that aren't even true anymore about you. Our biggest fear is what someone else may think about us, not necessarily anything that we're doing, but we may think someone's judging us or making fun of us or whatever. We're so worried about what everyone else thinks, and so a lot of those negative thoughts come from that. But I think that the crazy statistic here is knowing that 70 to 80% of the thoughts you had today are the exact same thoughts you had yesterday. That's crazy to really think about. And it goes to show you that your mind, it's just a pattern. So it's not who you are. You are not your thoughts. You're just a pattern that you've picked up along the way. So if you don't like that pattern, you don't like the thoughts that keep popping up, we just got to rewire your brain. And so that's what we're going to talk about, how to do that later on in this episode. So what I think it would be important for you to do now is to take out a piece of paper, and you could also use your phone, just the notes app on your phone, whatever's most convenient to you. And I would write down, like, what are some of the thoughts that continue to pop up in your head time and time again? Because there's something about getting that out on paper. It's almost like it removes it from your head, and it allows it to just kind of just remove itself completely and just get out of your mind. So write it down. Don't judge yourself by what comes out of your mouth or what comes out on the piece of paper, whatever it may seem like. I would just do that. Take a few seconds. It could be a few words. It could be a few sentences. It doesn't necessarily matter what it is, but it just matters that you get those thoughts out there. And that could be something from, hey, I think that the coach doesn't like me for some reason, or, I feel so nervous in the 8th inning, or whatever it is. Write it down, and then by doing that, you're going to free yourself up over time. Now we're going to talk about like observing our thoughts and like where do our thoughts come from? And there's something that's called automatic negative thoughts. And so those are thoughts that just show up from past experiences. They come from fear, from pressure, and you may not even realize that they're happening. And so it could be from a coach yelling at you in the past. It could be from, a bad game that you had. And so maybe when you have that same situation come up again, you start having these negative thoughts because the brain just repeats the same things over and over again because it's trying to conserve energy. And so that's why you have these same thoughts and feelings that come up in a lot of these different situations. It's just because you had these at one point, and then the way the brain is, it wants to repeat those thoughts time and time again because it wants to conserve energy. So this is what you call a pattern. And so don't view your thoughts as something that you are. As I said earlier, it's just a pattern that you've picked up. And so if you don't like the pattern, I'm going to show you how you can go about changing it. Some of the common things that I will hear players that say that constantly show up for them would be, I struck out, so I immediately think I'm a bad player. I got out, doesn't mean I hit the ball hard. All these are just natural, automatic negative thoughts, as I said earlier, that just happen and come about without even having to think about it. So the first section of today's episode, the brain is wired to protect you, not to help you perform. Once you understand that should free you up once you start to feel anxiety in pressure situations. Thoughts, where they come from, understanding that you have 40,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day, and 70 to 80% of those are the exact same thoughts you had yesterday. And then understanding automatic negative thoughts and how we will just have negative thoughts that just constantly come through our mind without even us having to think about it, because our mind is built to protect us. And so we can't judge ourselves. Now we're going to get into the core 5. So I call it the core 5. These are going to be some of the ways to help you improve your mental game. So we just talked about how the brain works, where our thoughts come from. Now we're going to get into, okay, like what are some ways to help us improve those things so we can perform at a much higher level? Number 1 is going to be vision. I think it's very important that you have a vision for yourself. What type of player do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who is more process driven? Do you want to be someone who, is like a tough at bat or is always competitive, always aggressive. Like, what type of vision do you want for yourself? Like, think about that, because if you don't have any vision, then it's going to be hard to come up with any plan because you don't know where you're going. So having a vision, understanding like what type of season do you want to have? What type of goals do you have? Once you know that, then it's easier to stay locked in throughout the course of the season. The next is going to be identity, and this goes off of vision. Identity is something that if you have a bad identity of yourself and you view yourself in a negative light, it's going to be very hard to work around that. And so an example would be, I'm a 250 hitter. That's my identity. I'm an average player. I always have the worst luck. The coach never likes me. All of these are identities. And so what ends up happening is no matter how well you start out the game or the season, you're going to revert back to that negative identity. If you think you're a 250 hitter and you start out the season hot, you're going to think in the back of your mind, I'm not this good, and you'll find ways to get back down to that 250 mark. I promise you, because that's exactly what happened to me when I was a player. I didn't believe that I was better than what I was performing when I was performing well. My identity was I'm just like a 250, 260 hitter. And so because of that, I always found my way right down in that range no matter what. So if you want to change a lot of times your outcome, it starts with changing, like I said, your vision. And then the next thing is going to be your identity of who you believe you are. And if your perspective is not right, there's no mental skills that will help you. So if your perspective's off and you got this negative view of yourself or the world, there's no breathing techniques, there is no skills, there is no meditation apps that's going to help you. You have to get your perspective right before anything else. A few years ago, I had Paul Yanish on the podcast, and Paul is currently the director of player development for the Chicago White Sox. And when I had him on the podcast, he was an assistant baseball coach at Rice University. And Paul played in the big leagues. He was a great player, great career. And he was always known, though, as someone who was a defensive first player that I would call. Like, I remember he played for the Reds. I live in Cincinnati, so I remember him as a player. And I remember this guy's really good defensively. And his bat was just it was serviceable. And he told this story on my podcast, and I never forgot it. He told me, he said he would have a lot of coaches that would go up to him and say, "Hey, Paul, you're so gifted defensively. All you have to do is hit X, and you'll be in the big leagues a long time. All you have to do is hit 230, 240. And he said what ended up happening was that created a counterproductive approach for him at the plate. And because it gave him an identity as a hitter. And so no matter what, he always viewed himself as just a 230, 240 hitter, And so because of that, he never got past that because someone gave him that identity and he kind of accepted it and took it on himself. Now, those coaches were trying to help him, and at the time they were thinking, oh, this is going to allow him to relieve some stress and not put so much pressure on himself. But it goes to show you that terminology is a very dangerous thing as a coach. And what you say to a player in terms of what type of player they could be, or if only you do this, then X will happen. They can take that, make that their own identity. And then in this case, and Paul Yanish at the time was a Major League Baseball player. It wasn't like he was 12 years old. He was someone who was already a grown man playing at the highest level of the game, and he had this identity put on him, not on purpose, but I wanted to show that example because this is a real thing that if you don't understand what your identity is, then it's going to worrying about anything else in terms of what we talk about here is going to be a waste of time. We got to get the identity down pat first. So a question that I would think that you should ask yourself is, are there limitations that you've put on yourself? I think that's something, take some time, put that on a piece of paper, think about that. And then I would think going forward, then we'll be able to come up with a plan. So number one was, we talked about having a vision and an identity. Number two is going to be self-awareness. Self-awareness. So I think when I think of self-awareness, I think the definition is going to be like the ability to tune into your thoughts, feelings, and actions. So, for example, it's like, okay, like what's your body language like when you're walking to the plate? What's going on? What are you thinking and feeling during different situations throughout the games? Is it negative? Is it positive? And if it's negative, is it effective? There's some players where it's like when they get mad at themselves and cuss at themselves, they play better. So, okay, keep doing that. I mean, that's why it's important. That's why there's no one way to help players with the mental game, and why just having generic exercises doesn't help at all, because there's not just one way. Like, you think hitting mechanics is complicated. Like, think about the brain and how that works. Like, this is very complicated stuff. There's not just one way to do it. That's why I outlined this episode, to ask yourself a lot of these questions, and then that allows you to come up with the own answers. So I always think it's like, okay, what am I thinking during games? And then, is it effective? Am I playing better because I'm thinking of something negative? Or if not, then I need to change that to something else. And then lastly, where do I need to improve? Where do I need to improve at as a player? Where do I need to be able to make the most amount of changes to help the team? All these different things. That's self-awareness, extremely important. And if you're never aware, then you can never know. Number 3 is focus. Focus is something that is a trainable skill, but I want you to think about focus like this. You're in the box and you're completely present on nothing else except the ball in the pitcher's hand. Like, that's the place we want to be. That's the place we want to be. And it's like, okay, how do we get to that point? Well, it starts actually off the field. It doesn't start on the field. And here's an example. Let's just say you're at the grocery store and you're in line and you're bored because you have nothing else to do. What do? You go to your phone right away. You pick out your phone and you start scrolling on your phone right away. That would be a perfect time where you can actually improve and help yourself from a focus standpoint, because you would be training your brain. Nope, we're not going to do what you want to do. We're going to focus on what I want to focus on, which right now is absolutely nothing. And so that's how you train your mind to focus, is by when it wants to go and do other things like scrolling on your phone or watching TV, and that's not productive because there's two sides of your brain, and you tell yourself, nope, we're not going to do that. You're training your mind to focus right there. That's one way off the field you can help yourself on the field from a focus standpoint. So not scrolling on social media before the game, not maybe even changing your stance at every single time you start to struggle. Focus is something that we have to train off the field, and then when we do that, it's going to eventually roll over on the field. Number 4, which is something I've talked about a lot, process over outcome. So if you judge yourself by getting hits, then unfortunately, your outcome's probably not going to be as high as somebody who evaluates themselves by their process. So maybe ask yourself instead, is like, okay, was I on time? Was I swinging out a good pitch? And if so, it was a great at bat. No matter what happened, it was a great at bat. And then number 5 is going to be routine. So I think it's important to have a routine, because a routine eliminates thinking. And shoot, even Michael Jordan said that, is like, man, this helps me conserve energy by just starting the day with a simple chest pass and not doing anything else. So having some sort of routine, extremely important. Come up with your own routine. It could be the way you walk to the plate. It could be the way you put your batting gloves on. It could be all those different things, but I think it's important to have some sort of routine, and that's going to help you stay locked in throughout the course of the season. After your at-bat's over, you maybe ask yourself a few different questions of like, okay, did I have a plan? Did I commit to the plan? Was I on time? Did I swing at a good pitch? All these different things are very important, and all those things are things that you can control and are not outcome-based. I one time had a player ask me, how do I change how I view myself when I've viewed myself in such a negative light for my entire life? And I told him, you do that by what you focus on and what you're intentional on a daily basis. Just like we had said before, what you focus on off the field and what you're intentional about off the field will translate to what is going on the field. So if you have this negative mindset, negative identity about yourself, a lot of times it needs to start off the field, and by what you're focusing on, and what, being aware of like, Okay, like when am I focusing on X, Y, and Z? Like, am I negative most of the day? What am I thinking about most of the day? That starts with that awareness. And by being intentional by what you're focusing on daily, you're gonna eventually improve how you view yourself as a player on the field. So if you view your success as getting hits, then your self-worth is going to be determined by getting hits. That's just the way it is. One exercise that I'll have players do, and I'd recommend that you do this right now, is before the season or even during the season, I'll say, like, okay, if this season will be a success for you, if what? And then I'll see what they write. And so usually here's what ends up happening. You'll get these answers. I hit 350. The season will be a success if I hit 350. I start every game. I hit in the top of the lineup. Well, the problem with all of those is you can't control any of those. You can't control hitting 350. You can't control whether or not you start or where you hit in the lineup. So I don't want to view that as success, as something I can't control. You can't control any of those. What if you viewed success or a successful season as I'm going to have a plan for every single at bat? I'm going to have fun during every game, and I'm going to compliment one teammate each game. Well, you can do that every single game. Like, that's something that will be attainable. And what do you think would happen if you focused that on success and you did that every single game? You would have a phenomenal season. You'd have the best season of your life. So I think that's a good question for players to start out with. The next question, I think, is, okay, that's a successful season. What does a successful at bat look like? Is it getting on base? Is it working the count? Is it hitting the ball hard? All those things are great, but you can't control any of those again. And so what if instead it was a successful at bat is swinging at a good pitch. It's being on time. It's making a good swing decision. It's having an aggressive mindset, staying relaxed. Those are things you can control. That's success that you can control time and time and time again. So that's why I think it's important to ask yourself a few of those questions. And I always like telling this story about Joey Votto because I heard it and it's exactly what we're talking about. One time after a game, Joey had the game-winning hit. He went 3 for 4. And the hitting coach found him after the game and said, like, hey, like, great job. That was awesome. And Joey looked frustrated. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? Like, you just had the game-winning hit. And, we won the game. You went 3 for 4. And Joey says, yeah, but that's not success for me. That's not going to be sustainable over the course of the season in terms of I'm not going to get the results that I want with that type of performance. And this hitting coach was like, that's weird, man. Like, that's whatever. I guess this guy's as weird as they say. The very next day, he goes 0 for 4 and he finds the hitting coach and he says, that is success right there to me. If I do that day in and day out, I'm going to have a great season at the end of the year. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? You went 0 for 4. And he goes, yeah, but I swung at my pitch and I was on time. So he viewed success as swinging at his pitch and being on time. And if he did both of those things, in his book, he went 1 for 1. So even though the stats said 0 for 4, in his own book, it was 4 for 4. If you can incorporate that type of process-driven mindset for yourself, think about how good you're going to be over the course of the season. You're not going to let you striking out a few times a game ever get to you. And you're not going to ever get too high, going back to the Roger Hornsby example of your first 60 at bats, nobody could get you out. You're never going to think you're better than you are, and you're never going to view yourself as being less of what you are. You're always going to be right in the middle. So I would take some clues from that and just understand that the best players in the world are viewing success differently than somebody who's just doing game changer stats. I'll sometimes get this question from players. It's like, I want to improve my confidence. How do I improve my confidence? It's like, okay, well, confidence is dictated by how you define success and failure. So if you don't have high confidence right now, then it's like, well, how do you define success? Because if it's something that's outcome oriented, yeah, you're probably always going to struggle with confidence because you can't control the outcome. But if you want to improve your confidence, then pick something you can always control. That's why going back to being on time, swinging at a good pitch, being aggressive, all these different things, you can control those. And when you can control them and you view that as success, then you're able to repeat that time and time and time again. And guess what happens to your confidence? It goes way up. So that's just a simple trick. If you want to improve your confidence, it's going to be influenced by how you view success and failure. When you're hitting your best, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? Answer this question. When you're hitting your best, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? A classic example that I'll get from players is, I am thinking of nothing. I feel very relaxed and I'm aggressive. Okay, I like that. Now we'll go to the opposite end. When you're hitting your worst, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? A lot of times I'll get this answer. I'm thinking of my mechanics. I feel very stiff. I'm tight. Okay, well, guess what? When you're hitting your best, you're thinking of nothing, you feel very relaxed, and you're aggressive. View that as success. View that as success. That's a simple way, because oftentimes we'll get players be like, well, how do I know what to view success as? Or what's an example for me? Take some time to answer this question. When you're hitting your best, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? And whatever your answer is, there you go. That's how you view success, because you're going to focus on something that's going to be process oriented, that is custom to you. All right. If you guys buy into this stuff, I'm telling you're going to reach your potential as a player. You just are. It's impossible not to. It's going to be hard to stay bought into this in a world where mechanics and statistics and all these different things are always thrown your way. But just note, we're playing a different game here. All right, you're taking AP physics and everyone else is in biology. We got to think of this game from a higher level than just what's right in front of us on a day-by-day basis. So I think that's something I'd recommend taking some time and think about that. And then the last thing on this section is just going to be, think about, who do you think about most of the day? Do you think about yourself, your teammates, your friends, your family? If we can eliminate thinking of ourself, then what that's going to do is it's going to free us up more. We've all heard the cliche thing of like, oh, I'm just going to do one thing to help my team today. Well, there's something to be said about that, because if you focus on your team, you will improve the chances of your own success, because you won't be thinking about yourself. So you won't be in your own head. You won't be stiff. You'll be nice and relaxed, and we'll be thinking of something that's much bigger than yourself. So a summary over the second section of this episode is self-awareness, identity, defining success, what's going on when you're hitting well, what's going on when you're not hitting well, and then think of others before yourself. Mental game education. Now we're going to talk about, why is this game so mental? Like you never hear of basketball players in the NBA like having all these mental issues or having the yips or anything like that. You never hear that. Or a linebacker in the NFL. Like, why is it so specific to baseball and even softball? And the reason is some of the things we've talked about. One, your mind is built to protect you from failure, not to help you thrive. Two, it's a game that is designed to make you fail. And then three, there's hours of dead time to overthink. There's a 3-hour game, and they've actually done the calculations on this. So let's just say an average game is 3 hours. The average time that a ball is in play is 18 to 22 minutes. That means you have 2 hours and 40 minutes of time to think. 2 hours and 40 minutes of time to think where there is dead time. There's no ball in play. There's no action. Nobody's trying to go from first to second or anything. So that's why this game is so mental, and that's why it's very important to let your mind wander during the game. You can't stay locked in for 3 straight hours. Let your mind wander, and then right before the pitcher's about to pitch, then you walk back in. And then after the pitch, the hitter takes a pitch or whatnot, let your mind wander for 10, 15 seconds, and then lock back in. It's the same thing from a hitting or pitching standpoint. Like you step in the box and it's like, okay, like you're locked in, you take a pitch, let your mind relax for a second and wander. Then you lock back in. So a big part of this is just is learning the skill of locking in and then letting your mind rest as well. Because of all this dead time, you can't always be on, or else that's when a lot of times this anxiety and stress and everything starts going your way. The next thing is expectations. We've all heard this before. I can't hit slow pitching. I can't hit slow pitching. And a lot of times I'm like, well, why is it that major league teams are drafting players who throw 100 miles an hour if nobody could ever hit slow pitching? And the reason why slow pitching is hard to hit for a lot of players is expectations, right? You have these expectations heading into the at-bat where you have a pitcher on the mound who's not very good. You think like, okay, like, well, I kind of have to get a hit because if not, then I don't view myself as a very good hitter, whether you think that consciously or subconsciously. So what ends up happening is statistically, the data is actually still not in your favor. You're probably still not going to get a hit. So when you don't get a hit, you feel bad about yourself because you had these high expectations since the pitcher's not very good. So what I tell players, if you're facing a slow pitcher or you're facing Paul Skeens, just lower your expectations for yourself. All right? Because what that's going to do is you're not going to put pressure on yourself. You're not going to try to do too much. And no matter what happens, you're going to stay in that neutral mindset where we want. We get into trouble when our expectations start to go way higher than they should be. And a lot of it's things we can't control. It's the batting average, what other people think about us, drafted, playing time. You have all these expectations, and then when they don't happen, you get so disappointed. Well, if you just removed expectations completely, then you're free. Then you don't have to worry about anything else. And so that'd be something I think is lower your expectations for yourself, especially when you're facing a slow pitcher. Quick break for a second. I have released my swing decisions course several months ago, and I've gotten a ton of good feedback from college coaches across the country. Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, even professional baseball and high school coaches as well. And what this course does is it teaches you how to improve what I think is one of the most important skills in hitting, swing decisions. I didn't want to do another course on mechanics or anything like that. I wanted to do a course that I believe would help a lot of players. And so in this course, you're going to learn different pitch recognition drills, swing decision drills, different mental game techniques, how to go about helping hitters pick up pitchers who are tipping their pitches, building in an approach. There's different checklists that you can give players on being more process oriented and helping them with the mental side of the game. So if that's something you're interested in, head to patrickjonesbaseball.com/swing. patrickjonesbaseball.com/swing. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just scan the QR code. I think it's something that's awesome. Would love to hear your feedback after you go through the course. The last section of today's episode is going to be on counts and statistics. I think it's always important to throw some data in there and just help you understand like visually, like, okay, like I need to have more of an aggressive mindset in these counts versus other counts. So if you're somebody who is more data driven, I think that you may like this. If we think about like all the hitters counts, 2-0, 3-1, 3-0, and we think about the MLB average in those hitters counts, it's 339. And then we think about pitchers counts like 0-1, 0-2, 2-2, 1-2. The MLB average is 192. And then here's the thing that's crazy. At the lower levels, those numbers are way they're magnified. They're even if it's 339 in a hitter's count at the MLB level, it's probably 439 at the high school level. So it's important. Hitters counts, you got to be ready to pull the trigger. 0 strikes, MLB average, batting average, 336. 1 strike, 326. And then 2 strikes, it goes all the way down to 168. Think about that. Even counts, MLB average is 282. And I said those statistics for 0-0 count, and then you get 1 strike on you and 2 strike on you, because here's a situation I see often. Hitter goes up to the plate. They take strike 1 right down the middle. The second pitch, they foul it off, so now they're down 0-2. And then that third pitch, they strike out looking on a ball that's a ball or two off the plate technically. They go back to the dugout. They're mad at the umpire. They think it's the umpire's fault. Nope, it's your fault because you didn't strike out on strike 3. You struck out because you took strike 1 right down the middle. So if you want to improve your strikeout rate, be ready to swing right out of the gate. Be ready to swing right out of the gate. And then swings outside of the rulebook strike zone. I think this is interesting for people to note. The highest chase rate at the MLB level is a 3-2 count. the highest chase rate. So what does that mean? It means when you get in a 3-2 count, for a lot of players, you should shrink the zone, not expand the zone. Because statistically, that's the count where players swing outside the strike zone more than any other count. So 3-2 count, think about maybe shrinking the zone and not expanding that just because you have 2 strikes on you. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share it on social media. We're on YouTube. So if you're someone who is more of a visual learner and you're listening to this episode, you can go on YouTube and you can look at all the PowerPoint slides that I put on for this. Just go to Patrick Jones Baseball. If you're listening on audio, please make sure to subscribe and then share this with a friend or tweet about it on Twitter, whatever social media platform you're on. Thanks again, and we'll see everybody next time. All right, that was better.